We have details for the NHL Entry Draft Lottery. So, what does that mean for the Seattle Kraken? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Seattle hockey fans, welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken, and I'm also a contributor at CBS Sports, where I talk NHL and women's basketball. You probably have seen my writing everywhere from The Athletic, before they were also part of the New York Times, but I wrote for the New York Times as well, and places like the Washington Post, and even at the NHL.com/Kraken website. And, I've been grateful to be your host here of the Locked On Kraken show from the very beginning. And it's been a wild and crazy ride. We're about to hire another head coach. But listen, I'm still here. Want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox, no console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On. And we are going to stay locked on the Kraken. And we know the draft is coming up. And the draft lottery will officially be on May 4th. May 5th. The odds for the draft lottery are in favor of the San Jose Sharks. They have 18.5% odds to win the draft lottery, and their odds to win or receive the first overall pick, 25.5%. Your Seattle Kraken sitting at 7.5 in each category. Now, what that means is we're probably in that 4 to 6, 7 range. At least that's what a lot of experts think. And what's available in this draft? Well, we're going to talk about that a little bit more as things continue to move forward once we have the draft lotto and things of that nature. But I can give you the rankings that the NHL and Central Scouting has. These are North American skaters. So these are going to be your Canadian and US born players that are also playing in the United States. You can see Matthew Schaefer there, James Higgins, who some people say could come to Seattle. Caleb Denoyer is another player we've seen in mock drafts connected to Seattle. You have Radim Murtka, who's playing in the WHL for Seattle at the moment. Carter Bear is playing for Everett. So, some names that people might be familiar with. That is, though, just regarding North American players. When you look at the list for international players, at the top of the list, you see Anton Frondel, who is another player that we've seen in some mock drafts connected to the Seattle Kraken. Wouldn't you know, a lot of people are guessing that the Seattle Kraken will take a centerman. However, we now have a new general manager and a new president who was our former general manager, and we have no head coach. Oh gosh, I keep saying it as if I'm going to get used to it, but I'm really not. Anyway, Frondel, I've seen attached in some mock drafts to the Seattle Kraken. I guess question of the day, or at least for this segment, because we got a jam-packed show here for you. But what are the highest needs? And I think with the NHL draft, I've been talking about draft a lot because I cover the WNBA, and you definitely take best player available up to a certain point. And, for the Seattle Kraken, I'm trying to figure out what is the draft strategy? What is the the right draft strategy here. And I guess the way to think about it is, and this is why you go best player available, is that you're hopeful, especially if you're not a winning team, which the Seattle Kraken is not. Excuse me. You're hopeful that whatever ails the organization now, or even the AHL team, to some extent the ECHL team, but mostly the AHL team and the NHL team, you're hopeful that by the time the picks that you take in the upcoming drafts, by the time they're ready, if they're not NHL ready, you know, as of their draft, that you figure some of that out. So I think you still go best player available. We know that the Seattle Kraken have always wanted to build up the middle, and we're actually going to hear from um, Joey Daccord on today's episode. We're going to continue on with our exit interview excerpts, if you will. And Joey Daccord talking about young talent up the middle. That seems to be the trend, the theme for the Seattle Kraken. So until we hear otherwise, that's probably what we are going to get. So we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics when it comes to who we think that players are or what players are going to be available once we know where the Seattle Kraken are picking, and we'll find that out within the next week or so. You know, the messy middle is where the Seattle Kraken is with regard to the standings, but also being in that middle kind of no man's land doesn't help you when it comes to the expansion draft, when it comes to the entry draft. Now, again, you have you have teams that have the best odds, whether you're looking at tankathon.com, whether you're looking at, Bleacher Report, Money Puck, whatever the case is. These teams are not teams that have played good hockey in the last handful of years. And that goes, I'm not going to rehash all of our tanking conversation, but I just find it so interesting that people are willing to lean into the tankathon, the tanking of it all. And you have teams like San Jose, who's has great odds. Chicago has great odds. These are teams that have they performed well in the last handful of seasons? No. I think, Philadelphia, Boston, and even Nashville, they had bad seasons this year. Buffalo kind of really in the messy middle. They have their odds are right around our odds, a little bit lower, slimmer odds. Anaheim, slim odds. Pittsburgh had a crazy year, couple of years. But also a team with no head coach at the moment. So, I'm not Team Tank. Neither is Joey Daccord. Just spoiler alert, we're going to hear from him in the next segment. But because again, the teams that are here, tanking, they're not good teams. They're if the focus is on tanking, at least from the front office, they haven't proven that tanking is a way to get you a championship. So, just getting the best overall player is not every year. That's not enough. You have to have the right player, the right mix of players, the right coach, it has to be like this perfect ecosystem. And the Seattle Kraken are far from a perfect ecosystem. I continue to say I have so many questions. I am on social media, and I'm just so grateful that I'm not the only one that's completely puzzled and befuddled. Confusion is an understatement. I don't understand some of the moves that the Seattle Kraken team is making, but we'll have to see how it pans out. Coming up on today's show, I've already mentioned we're talking to Joey Daccord, or we're going to hear from Joey Daccord. And we're also going to talk about the Andy Eide Award. Now, this is something that, one of our beat reporters, Darren Brown, he reached out to media, really wanted to have an Andy Eide Award. It was presented to Joey Daccord, who is a gem of a guy, fan award, MVP, and basically this award, the Andy Eide Award, goes to basically the player from the Seattle Kraken that media members enjoyed speaking to the most, made our jobs delightful, was very accommodating. Joey has always been accommodating. I've told the story before that, I come into the locker room at training camp and, just saying, "Hey, Joey, do you have a few minutes?" And before we start the interview, he's asking me how I'm doing. We had a conversation about Arizona State. Just a great guy, a mensch of guy, right? Anyway, so we're going to hear from Joey Daccord, and we've already heard from Philipp Grubauer in his exit interviews. So the natural progression is, since we're talking about Joey Daccord, let's talk about goaltending, right? But specifically, let's talk about buying out Philipp Grubauer and maybe another forward or two. That's coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by Game Time. We know the Stanley Cup playoffs are in full effect. And if you've never been to a live NHL playoff game, it's unlike anything else. The intensity, the speed, the energy in the building, it's next level. And thanks to Game Time, getting in the door is easier and more affordable than ever. And I mean, I tell you all the time, there's so many things that I love about Game Time, but you get last minute deals. You can save up to 60% by buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all of the good things. I told you on yesterday's episode, my favorite band, Haim, is coming to Seattle. They're coming to Vancouver. They're playing MSG again. I will be doing pre-sale, just letting you know, but in the event that I have to find last minute tickets to anything not Haim related, I'm using Game Time. I also love the all-in pricing because I got a ball on a budget. So seeing the total cost upfront, no surprise fees at checkouts is huge. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Hey, thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken, the Andy Eide Award winner. It's the one and only. It's the one and only. It is Joey Daccord. I was so grateful that Darren included me, all media, right? Came up in our Slack channel. I am so grateful that this award exists. I didn't know Andy very well, but, I know that Andy loved and respected Seattle sports, Seattle hockey in particular. And I'll probably post the full exit interview because if you are a Seattle Kraken fan, which obviously you are, if you're a Joey Daccord fan, but especially if you're someone that just really honors and respects athletes who get it, who understand and appreciate and don't take the fan base for granted, you're going to want to hear everything that Joey talked about. I'm not going to play it all, but here's a little bit of Joey getting the Andy Eide Award, and it's a microphone, which I think is pretty cool.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, this is very cool. I feel very honored. Andy was, I didn't get to know him super well, but he was always an awesome guy and great person to have around for us. So this is very special. Means a lot to me, and thanks to all of you guys for being awesome to work with as well. It's a pleasure to work with you guys every day.
Total props goes to Darren Brown, too, because he actually couldn't, he's on the call, he couldn't.
Should we take a photo? Let's take a photo, me and you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you don't need me.
Drop the box and let's take a photo. Who's taking it? Right here?
Someone's got it.
Look at that. Joey, such a sweet, kind human. And it was unfortunate that Darren couldn't be there for the celebration, but Joey Daccord wins another award. We did the awards that came from the team, fan favorite, Joey Daccord, MVP, Joey Daccord. So let's talk about Joey Daccord, because if we look at Money Puck and you look at goalies with the most games played, Andrei Vasilevsky actually, and Connor Hellebuck, 63 games. Sam Montembeault, 62 games. Igor Shesterkin and Ilya Sorokin, 61 games. And then you have Joey Daccord, just outside of the top 10, but played 57 games. Now, if we look at goals saved above expected, Hellebuck, Vasilevsky, Thompson, Stolars, Montembeault, Kemper, Shesterkin, and Joey Daccord at number 8. So Joey Daccord definitely had a high work volume. He talked about that in his exit interviews. We'll hear a little bit about that. I just want to set this up for you because I know some people were like, oh, he's got to suck it up, Buttercup. He's got to play a full tilt. And there were goalies that played more games than him. There were also a lot of goalies that played fewer games than him. Of course, Philipp Grubauer is included in that. My point with regard to his workload is that we were told at the expansion draft that there would be more of an equitable split in net. And that has never happened for the Seattle Kraken. I talk about this every season. I talk about it every offseason. I talk about it every preseason because the Seattle Kraken have never had a healthy goalie tandem. And Philipp Grubauer is the constant. He's the through line. Now, conversations about buyouts and things of that nature have been in the works at least. Excuse me. I have a little bit of a cold, which is, I hate having spring and summer colds. Anyway, buyout conversations have been part of the Seattle Kraken conversation for at least now going into 2 off seasons, maybe for some even more, who had a little bit of a shorter leash, so to speak, for Philipp Grubauer. So why am I mentioning this? We're going to talk a little bit more about it in the last segment, but I'm mentioning it because that impacted Martin Jones. It's impacted Philipp Grubauer. It's impacted Chris Drieger, although he just had some bad luck when he was here with us. And it's impacted Joey Daccord. But to that end, and we heard Dan Bilesma talk about this, and you're about to hear Joey Daccord chime in as well. The thing that Joey is doing is that he's now prepared. He knows or is expecting to have that number 1 spot. And why would he think that he doesn't? We'll talk about that again in the next segment. So we're going to hear from Joey. We're going to hear from Joey in a minute. We're first going to hear him talk about and contextualize this season. And you'll also hear him talk about what that means for him with regard to how he's going to approach his offseason. And I like his mentality. I like where he's at. And that's why he's our number 1. Here's Joey Daccord again.
Yeah, obviously disappointment. Not making the playoffs it's tough. We all want to be in the playoffs. We all want to be fighting for the Stanley Cup, and we're all competitors and we want to win. So it's tough when it's not going your way, but I was really proud of the way we finished out the season. I think since the deadline we were above 500, and that's an easy time to just say, hey, we're not going to make playoffs. It is what it is. Let's just mail it in. And I got a lot of respect for the guys in our locker room and the way we competed throughout the end of the season. And I think it showed a lot of character. But yeah, obviously disappointed to not make playoffs. And I think I said it last year, but same kind of thing this year. We're going to hopefully use that as fuel this summer and come back ready to go next season.
And so, again, I mean, not surprising, right, that it was a disappointing season. I think we all know that. We all can understand and appreciate where Joey's coming from. But he talked about that there were times where this team could have basically kind of just accepted their fate and leaned into it. And I think they did for a little bit. And Joey alludes to that in the next clip that we're going to play. But he was impressed also that there was fight. I keep telling you, that for me came from the captain. Jordan Eberle really impressed me with that approach. Let's look though. I'm pulling up here. This is the career stats for Joey Daccord. You can see he's played the most minutes in this last season than he has in his entire career. Time on ice, 32, 9, 5, 15, as in 3,295 minutes and 15 seconds. He played the most games he's ever played in a season, 57, 7 more than he played last year, 55 starts. The most wins he's ever had, 27 wins, the most losses, but kind of comes with the territory. Goals against average, 275, save percentage, a 906. He had a better save percentage last year and in 22-23, but he only played 5 games. But all things considered, not too bad. I do think there were some games that definitely skewed that a little lower. But Joey Daccord is solid. He got the contract extension. He's a part of the future. And I think as he should be. I remember we talked about it last season. Some people didn't want Joey Daccord to maybe even make the team. We were talking about what was the competition going to look like between Chris Driedger and Joey Daccord, assuming that Philipp Grubauer is going to get that number 1 spot. That quickly turned into Joey Daccord becoming the ace, so to speak. And now I don't think it's not a question, especially if the only alternative as of right now is Philipp Grubauer. And that's why coming up on Locked On Kraken, we're going to talk about buyouts. I've mentioned this multiple times this year. If you're an everydayer or an OGer, we've talked about this. I've asked you what you think. Now, what are the pros and cons, the calculated risk when it comes to buying out Philipp Grubauer, keeping him, stashing him in the AHL? I mean, there are different options. I think some are much more diabolical than others. And at the end of the day, right, this is a business. And some are going to cost the Kraken more than it might be worth. So what is realistic for the Seattle Kraken with regard to Philipp Grubauer? And some of that might land squarely, well, all of it really lands squarely on the desk of our new general manager. And I think what we see from Jason Botterill regarding goaltending is going to instruct how different of a course correction, if this is a course correction at all, is happening with the Seattle Kraken. So let's talk about that coming up on today's episode. And this episode of Locked On Kraken, once again brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Now, listen, we know the playoffs are here. You're going to get your game time tickets for the Stanley Cup playoffs, but we also have the NBA playoffs. MLB is in action. The WNBA is coming back soon, and the PWHL playoffs are about to start. FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on all of that action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Now, a lot of people love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking your favorite team or driving into player props. I love the futures bets. You can look at, who has the best odds to win the Stanley Cup even before the season starts, who's going to win the WNBA championship, all of that good stuff. And plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken, dealing with a little bit of a spring cold, but that's not going to stop the show. Might have delayed it, but it won't deny it. Also, a little bit of a raspy, a little raspy radio voice for you. Oh, yeah. Little jazz snaps, jazz hands. There you go. Okay. So let's get back to the regularly scheduled program here. You got to laugh, right? Okay. So buyouts. Now, once again, because I'm pretty sure Sound of Hockey did this last year, but once again, Sound of Hockey has a really great little primer with regard to buyouts, but also specific to Philipp Grubauer. And so since Grubauer is definitely 26 and older, he would get 2/3 of his remaining salary, and it would be broken up evenly over twice the remaining contract terms. So when it comes to Philipp Grubauer, we're going into, of course, the 25-26 season. He is at 5.9 million AAV. The salary is 5.6. 26-27, he'd be again at 5.9 million AAV. Salary would be 4.5. Total salary owed just a scotch over 10 million. And so if we're looking at a buyout for Philipp Grubauer in the coming season, it's going to cost 6.7, a little more than $6.7 million for the Seattle Kraken. Again, his contract is at 10.1 and he would get 6.7 if the buyout happens this year, because Philipp Grubauer is on contract through 26-27. There are a few articles that break this down. But so this is what Sound of Hockey is saying. 33 years old, Grubauer would be paid 2/3 of his remaining $10.1 million salary, $6.73 million, again, evenly over 4 years, which is twice the remaining term of his contract. So $1.6 million per season. Now, the yearly cap would be reduced if we go the buyout, but penalties are lingering for twice the remaining contract term, and the team must still find a replacement goalie because we don't have one right now. So you're still going to have to, if you buy Philipp Grubauer out, you're still going to have to place a goaltender on the roster, whether you get them from the AHL, whatever. So in this article, there are, and just in general, but the article breaks down the 3 different pathways. AHL pathway, we saw a little bit of that, play out the contract, and then mutual termination. Now, mutual termination is interesting because, that would mean Philipp Grubauer just walks away. Again, he's due $10 million. I'm not walking away from any form of million of dollars. So, I don't know what Philipp Grubauer's life is like, but I'm not walking away from 10 mil. But, he's got to do what he's got to do. He's obviously frustrated. He wants more starts. And that's just not something that I think he's going to get because, we're hearing that Joey Daccord is preparing, to get even more fit. And so here's actually what Joey Daccord said with regard to the offseason.
I think it's not, obviously we missed playoffs, but it's not as big of a fix as it may seem. I think we have a clear blueprint for how we need to play to be successful. And I think we found that a little bit more consistently towards the end of the season. And I think it's just sticking to that method and that game plan just with everything we have, right? Because once you veer off that, then it kind of becomes maybe some individuals. It's like a team playing together versus a bunch of individuals that are on the ice at the same time. And that's not a knock on anyone on our team. It just kind of happens. And when you start losing, it's easier for that to happen. So if we can stick together and maintain that identity, I think that's going to be really important for us moving forward. And the other thing too is the NHL is such it's like a momentum and confidence-based league at every position, at every team. Like once you start kind of like we started off not so great, and then you start kind of losing, and it becomes such an uphill battle. And then it's like, if we had won a couple more games in the first half of the year, maybe we think we're a better team, and then we just keep playing better, right? Like it's so much of it is confidence based, and then once we fall 6, 8, 10 points out of playoffs, like, oh, well, maybe we're not a playoff team, and then the confidence goes down. I really don't think it's as much of a big fix as maybe it may seem on the outside. I really believe in our group. We have so many good pieces. We have such a good culture in our locker room. We have so many amazing people on our team and in our staff, and yeah, I think it's just, I mean, and honestly, you look at it too, like Maddie and Shane are going to be an unbelievable 1-2 punch down the middle for a long time. Those kids are still so young, and they're going to be great players for us, and we do have a really solid core here, so I'm excited for the future.
I want to just pause there because we will get to what Joey's going to do in the offseason, but he talked about basically a mindset and a mentality. And I just got to say, I don't know if I'm stating the obvious here, but I don't think that the mindset and the mentality of Philipp Grubauer was always at its peak. And I think some of that is because Philipp Grubauer seemed to understand or believed that there were certain things that he needed to have peak performance. And the Seattle Kraken weren't offering that. I mean, I talked about it. He goes to the AHL and then he only played 5 games. Now, yes, maybe he would have played an extra one if he hadn't been sick, but still, he played 5 games. Joey Daccord started, 15 of the last 16 games or something crazy like that. It just seemed like, and I don't know, was that the tussle that gave Dan Bylsma the boot? Because Dan Bylsma didn't seem to have an issue parking Philipp Grubauer. And that's why when he was like, oh, he's playing with more confidence, he was just saying things that didn't make sense based on the decisions that I was assuming he was making with regard to Philipp Grubauer. But I wonder if some of the tension, perhaps, between Dan Bylsma and Ron Francis, the rest of the front office, the ownership, was with regard to Philipp Grubauer. Now, I don't know if it was Bylsma that wanted to give Grubauer more starts and that didn't happen. Was it Bylsma that wanted to sit Grubauer and the front office was kind of forcing the issue? I'm less inclined to believe that was the case, but Joey Daccord's talking about a mentality, and I agree with him. The energy, the mentality, kind of falling into those losses really after Eberle went down. That's when we really started to compound the losses. So compound effect in the negative way. But I do think that from what we were hearing from Philipp Grubauer, he felt that he wasn't given every opportunity to be successful because he wasn't getting consistent starts. But his starts were not consistent. I mean, to say his play in his starts wasn't consistent. And, how much of that push and pull in net for a time impacted some of what Joey was talking about there. But again, Joey is committed to, getting after it. He wants to be prepared for what at this point in time we can only assume is going to be a heavy workload. Here's Joey again.
It's inevitable that you're not going to feel great towards the end of the season. And, priority number 1 is just getting the body feeling good. And then after that, we'll be laying a base in the weight room for next season so that I can handle the load of 50 to 60 games again. And I think, the fact the last 2 years I've stayed pretty healthy and played over 100 games the last 2 seasons means I'm probably doing a pretty good job with my preseason prep in the weight room. So pretty much stay the same in that regard and maybe just tweak it a little bit based on my summer goals. And then, towards the end of the summer, hop back on the ice and start getting back in the swing of things. I think it's important to take a break away from the ice, more mentally than anything. It's an absolute pleasure to play in the NHL every single night. Like I was thinking about it last night during the game. I was getting sad during the game, looking up and looking around during the game and seeing all the fans and looking up in the stands. And there's nothing like it in the world. It's the absolute best. But it is a mental grind, especially being a goalie and knowing that it's the game basically hangs on you every single night, and it's important to take that break mentally away from the ice.
I mean, again, he's a gem of a guy. All the more reason that I want to see us set specifically Joey Daccord up, but to set up our goaltenders and to set up this team in a way where we're not overburdening one particular department, one particular player. And unfortunately, yes, you can point to injuries, but it's not just injuries in my estimation as to why we've been overburdened or have underperformed in certain areas. It's that this team has put too much on certain players, always our goaltenders. And then again, there's the Berkey basket. Not the Birkin bag, but the Berkey basket. We've tried to put all of our offensive eggs in the Berkey basket, Andre Burakovsky, and it hasn't worked, which is why in that article that I'm talking about with respect to buyouts, wouldn't you know, a second case study in the Sound of Hockey talking about buyouts is Andre Burakovsky. And we will break that down on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Kraken. I'm going to go drink some hot tea, blow my nose, and get ready for another episode. Tomorrow, we also know that we're expecting an announcement of PWHL to Seattle. I will be in transit, unfortunately, but if you check out the Women's Hockey Report on social media, my co-host Rachel Donner should be keeping eyes on that. Of course, you can follow, I'm sure, Sound of Hockey, Circling Seattle Sports, etc. I know the Emerald City Hockey guys have been keeping tabs on that as well. So I think we'll be pretty well covered. I'm super excited. I hope that's the announcement. I hope it's everything that I believe it is. But be kind to yourselves. Be kind to one another. Let's hold fast. Let's stay true. Let's go Kraken. Get us a good goalie tandem. And then, of course, we got to cheer on our Firebirds and Mavericks as they continue on in the second round of the playoffs. I'm going to go get some rest. Until next episode, peace out, everybody.